about the economic burdens in the country, every government blames the former for leaving a huge economic debt to them. Doctor, what is the real issue here?
So, for this to look at this, we got to go back towards independence. Until about 1971, our GDP was within the range of the other developing countries, or post-independent developing countries like Singapore, Malaysia, or most of the other South Asian countries. So we were developing at a similar pace and similar range. So that's in terms of course, places like Singapore had an advantage simply because it was a smaller country, and right from the beginning they decided on focusing on services as versus Sri Lanka, where we have a predominantly agricultural sub base of GDP. So even though 7% of the, only about 8% of the GDP comes out of pure agriculture, 30% of our labor force is in fact engaged in agriculture. So that's a very large disparity in itself. However, that's apart from the main fact. The main fact is that since independence and until about 1971, we've had a situation where the bureaucracy, the central bank, and the how should I say, the professionals had a much bigger input into the economy, and therefore it was, let's say, better managed. But since 1971, there has been various different kinds of experimentations focused on us or forced on us by the politicians. And this really has become a serious issue because, as you know, when we compare our politicians with politicians in either in India or in Singapore or today in Malaysia, we don't have professionally qualified politicians as such. Our political system is basically coming up from the village level, and the politicians emerges from the village. Unfortunately, yes, they are as say son of the soil, or sons of the soil, or daughters of the soil, or in most cases today, daughters or sons of a previous politician. But and therefore we have very little experience that the politicians bring into the economy. Now this has been a problem since the 1970s, and what happened? So I'll give you a particular example from the 70s onwards. So in 1971, there was a new government that came in, which was called the Peramuna government, or the National Front government. And there was a government that came as a coalition between the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and the left parties, that's CP, the Communist Party, and the LSSP, Lanka Sama Samaja Party. Now, one thing I must say, the Lanka Sama Samaja Party had a very good team of professional politicians. That's probably the only one that had that professionalism, apart from maybe the JVP today has some of the professional politicians. But Sama Samaja Party had a very good set of professional politicians like Dr. N.M. Pereira, Colvinar de Silva, Betty Virakon. I can go on. I mean, most of these really good names that we still remember as people who made a fairly serious contribution to the country came from the LSSP. However, LSSP from 70 to 75 went on a course of experimentation with the economy, which is Dr. N.M. Pereira as finance minister. Now, what he did was he stopped all imports and he tried to build up a local economy. And people still remember things like the bread queue, or the palm polymer, the rice queue, clothes that were smelling of kerosene, because that is what we used to manufacture the dyes that were in the clothes. All of this, in reality, had some negative, how should I say, negative impact on the population. But on the other hand, it was helping to build a local economy. So a local production base. For example, we are talking quite a lot about the garment sector today. The base for that garment sector came from the SLFP government or the coalition government of 71 to 75. The base of the Export Development Board, which is EDB, which is basically today the main component of our export drive, came from that government. So the bases were put in there, but they didn't have the ability or the time frame, or they didn't have enough time to really get this thing working. And that really was the issue, where in 1977, a new government came in, which is Mr. Javadana's government, and they dismantled all of that. All of the production pipelines that were being set up, all of these things were dismantled. And I'll give you one particular example on this one, and as to how bad that impact was. Up to 1977, most of our chili, the green chilies, the dried chilies, onions, quite a lot of agricultural produce came from the northern province. In 1977, we opened up our borders, and immediately there was a flood of agricultural produce that came from India at prices that were less than half our prices. Now, the issue here is that we were not able to, we didn't have the scale of production, in other words, to produce at the scale that India was producing, and therefore get the scales that were necessary to lower the cost of these goods. But still, that money was being retained in Sri Lanka. If we had not opened up the import, the money that was going to the higher money or the additional money that we were buying the foods was being still retained in Sri Lanka. But what happened then is that all that money started going out. So our import bill went up radically. The people who were producing had immense problems, that is the local farmers, and that was the real beginning of the Liberation Tamil Tigers, LTTE, was that. The real beginning was the 1977 opening up of the import controls. So the Tamil farmers suffered immensely, and they had no livelihood as a result of this. And that you can see these are the decisions taken without, these are political decisions that were taken without really looking at the total impact, or there was no, there was no systematic thinking or system thinking in this country. There's still no system thinking in this country. So they think of, okay, let's address this issue, single issue. What were they addressing? Well, the rest of the world was having televisions, radios, all of these things. So we should also have these things. And we opened the whole economy out so that the floods came in, forgetting that by doing that, our local producers were getting very badly impacted. So that's one of the political decisions that were taken that changed the course of this country. So we are in, there were lots of pluses of that decision as well. But say, for example, we have increasing service economy. Our tourism has really taken up. All of that has happened, but our local production has basically become nothing. So those are the political decisions that has been taken in the economy, rightly or wrongly, which is adding to this burden that we are talking about. So for example, we start from 1977 onwards, our import bill goes up. It's now, I don't know what it is, the number today, but I know for today, right now, we only have 3 months. We can only import from the import bill with the money that we have. We can only import less than, sorry, not 3 months, because in July, end of next week, we will be paying a loan amount of $1 billion US. And once that money goes off, we have only 2 months of imports, or less than 2 months of imports. Right. So this is the issue that we have now. We have an issue where we don't make enough money locally or enough production locally. We got to import everything in, and therefore we don't have the money to import. That's the nub of this. And that all has come from years and years of experimentation with the economy. And that doesn't, I don't subscribe that to one family or to one set of politicians, because this has been happening since 1977 onwards, since the change of the policies of the 1977 government. So there's also another stream of thinking saying, oh, we've been taking too much of loans. So to talk about that, we got to go back as to why we were taking these loans. Unplanned or totally out of the system, egoistic projects. I'll give an example. There is a road that is being done today from the New Kalani Bridge through Rajagiriya to Athuragiri. It's called the elevated highway. This elevated highway should have cost us around $700 million US, no more. That is the cost of construction. Maximum cost of construction with finance is about $700 million US. But because it is in fact an ego project, it is not the real necessity, but it's a political necessity. It has been given to one single company, China Harbour, who's basically the king of, people say the king of this country now. China Harbour got it for $1,600 million US. And for this, we pay every year $108 million US for 15 years. Okay. Now, this is a solid example of things that never should have happened. So, for example, Nelum Kuluna. Today we are paying 526 million rupees interest every year. Zero activity from this Kuluna. Nobody is there. Complete waste of money. I won't talk about the Hambantota Harbour. I've spoken about it in previous occasions. I still think it is an unnecessary project that has happened, and we are not paying for it anymore. So it's gone, because we settled that money by getting selling it off, in a sense, for 99 years. Mattala Airport. These are projects that we've put in money, very serious amounts of money, and there's no return coming. So it's not just the Rajapaksa government that has been responsible for this. Even the last Yahapalne government planned on something. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. For example, the Yahapalne government planned to give a road again called the CEP 4, Central Expressway 4, from Kurunegala to Dambulla. The cost was about $1 billion. Fortunately, up to now, that has not been awarded. Unnecessary project. It was simply because the former president, Mr. Sirisena, wanted to go home quickly. So if he had taken the existing highways up to Kurunegala, and from Kurunegala he wanted to go to Polonnaru, if he had trusted Dambulla, he would have gone in about 45 minutes. That was the only reason. Of course, he was using helicopters, but it's a different story. But if he was going by road, that would have been the only reason why that road was necessary. What we need in this country is not roads. We need a public transport system. We need railways. We need a better bus system. And for all of that, railways should be the biggest priority that we should have. We should increase our railway structure. But unfortunately, the system thinking is not there. We only think of our egoistic projects, simply like the Mattala Airport, Mahinda Rajapaksa Airport. If CP4 came into be the Maitripala Road. So it's like that. It's because of certain political influences that decisions are being taken. So that's the burden. Unplanned, over the years, unplanned, completely unproductive projects that we have undertaken. And that is where today each of us has to pay, each of us, every our unborn children has to pay 600,000, I think it's nearly 700,000 now, rupees every year. That's our debt burden as a country. And when the dollar disparity goes higher and higher, that debt burden, as per person debt burden, will increase as well.
And also, Doctor, when we talk about the Rajapaksa family, they're the ones who basically run the country right now. How did we get here?
Again, that's an interesting question, because we tend to forget history. So if you take from the independence onwards, it's been just a couple of families that have been running this country. Independence, there was the Senanayakas, the Bandaranayakas, the Kotalavalas, and the Javadanas, 4 families. Okay, so in these 4 families, very interesting fact, these 4 families had one font. They all came from one family in reality. There was a Dr. Artigala who owned, sorry, even no, it was a doctor later. The Artigala family owned our, what is it called, the mines, the mineral mines. And those mines were the ones that was given, the graphite mines. Those were the ones that were really giving so much of money to that generation. So one of the Artigalers who owned these mines, his 3 daughters got married to a Senanayaka, Javardhana, and a Kotalavala. So those 3, and the Bandaranayakas is also related to that same family later on. So those 4 basically ran the country until 1988. So in 88, there was a change. Mr. Premadasa came in. And the Bandaranayakas came back in 1994. Bandaranayakas left only in 2005. So the Rajapaksas are now in control. True. But right throughout history, we've been ruled by families. So no surprise, simply because Rajapaksas are quite unique in a sense. All of these families, other than for the Senanayaka family, because the Senanayakas had Robert Senanayaka, F.R. Senanayaka, Dudley Senanayaka, and D.S. Senanayaka himself, there were about 5 Senanayakas who were in power at that time. And of course, the relatives, the Kotalavalas and Javadanas, they were all there. But they didn't impose too much of power over the others. I mean, the power was fairly well distributed amongst these families, and there was there was competition. That is why Bandaranaike broke away and started his own party in 1956, because that competition that was there. Kotalavala got angry and he nearly left the government. Dhanayaka became interim prime minister because of that for a short term. Dudley tried to manage. I mean, Dudley was supposed to be a gentleman politician, so he didn't impose too much of his will over the others. But the Rajapaksa family, on the other hand, controls the whole situation through other family members as well. So today what we have is, we have Gotabaya as the president, Mahinda as the prime minister, Basil as the finance minister, Chamal as the Mahavali minister. The list goes on. Namal is there as the next generation. Then there's Nipuna who's waiting on the lines. If you look at all the corporations, it's almost everything is a family connected member. So At the moment, I think somebody had done a recent study on this, and they say more than 53% of the total economy is controlled by the family. 53%. That's a very large number, right? So when we say the total economy, the government institutions that are handling the economy, the various different sectors. So, for example, if we take our whole budget, the biggest number in that budget comes from the defense forces. That's under the president. The second biggest of that will come from Mahavali as well, because Mahavali is spending a lot of money these days. So that comes under Chamal. So this goes on like that, and of course finance. So all of that is controlled by the Rajapaksas. And the Rajapaksas make sure that no other family can come up again. And that's very significant. There was the breakup of the SLFP with Maithripala Sirisena coming out. Also, the genesis of that was a speech given by a young politician, Duminda Dissanayake, at his father's funeral somewhere in 2013. Bertie Dissanayake was a very prominent regional politician. He was a chief minister of the Anuradhapura, the central province. When he died, his son, who was already a minister, gave a very powerful speech and said, Rajapaksas are responsible for my father's death. The Rajapaksas are not just responsible for his father's death. The Rajapaksas, it is being said, were also responsible for Duminda Disanayake's divorce from his first wife. Who was the first wife? The first wife was the daughter of Dimu Jayaratne, who was the prime minister at that time. They saw this nexus happening. The two families, the Jayaratnes are from Kandy, the Dissanayakes are from Anuradhapura, the Piyasena Gamages, who were from the south. These three families were getting together. There were intermarriages happening. They were very close friends. Rajapaksas saw this and immediately moved in to break up this nexus happening, because they were scared that the three new families were coming, three new political families were coming into the fold. So they control this. They are very good at doing that. So initially they wanted a Kandy Goi Buddhist link. That didn't happen. But now, that is, they don't need it anymore. They don't need it anymore because they're so powerful now that, that Kandy Goi Buddhist is not necessary. So they were looking at alliances with the central province. These are what I call not political alliances, but also family alliances. Because that is, at the end, blood is thicker than water. So they were trying to make those alliances, but they managed without those alliances as well. And they've become very powerful force. Whether that force can continue to the future, there's doubt now.
Right. Also, Dr. Kulatunga, taking all this into consideration, in your opinion, what is the future for Sri Lanka like?
I don't say the future is bleak. I can't afford to say the future is bleak. I think the future is, there is a future for us. But to do that, there will be pain. There will be a lot of pain. And that pain will come in the next 12 months, not today. We are feeling some pain today. That's not bad, actually. We are surviving. Next 12 months, we will feel it a lot more. So be prepared for what I call a long winter. But after every long winter, there's a bright summer.
Okay, this is excellent. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
I think basically, politically speaking, so if I take off my analyst hat and I say as a political being, I would say today, Rajapaksas are trying to consolidate the power. They may succeed actually, but it may not be a bad thing in that sense as well. If Basil Rajapaksa can figure out a way to cut down on the waste, cut down on these egoistic projects that has been happened. I think the president himself is not really egoistic in that sense. He doesn't want big roads or whatever. I think he's concentrating on getting some real progress going. For example, renewable energy. He is now focusing on increasing renewable energy as it should have been, so many years ago. He's focusing on that. Our biggest bill is fuel bill in Sri Lanka. So we had to stop import this fuel. They stopped already the import of fancy cars, the expensive vehicles. He stopped that. We have enough vehicles. The only thing that we need is buses and trains. This is what we have to increase. We have too many vehicles in this country, too many cars in this country. So increase the public transport, provide better public transport, provide better infrastructure for schools, that's for education, for medicine, for the hospitals. That's what we need. So focus on that. He's doing that already. So there is some significant changes that has happened in this structure. But the main thing that has still not happened is getting the professional planners, economists, into the real decision-making body, the parliament.
When the president came in, he brought in the Viatmaga too. Doesn't the Viatmaga consist of all of these think tanks?
I would strongly disagree. Unfortunately, Viatmaga has become the opposite of what it should have been. So we have people who have been appointed to the parliament saying that they are the professionals, but they say things that are dramatically opposite to something that the professionals would say. We got examples from Dr. Sita, from Professor Chan. Sorry, that's not being Viat, that is being Aviat.